She fed the children everyone ignored, never knowing their father was the vampire king watching him. The people above rarely noticed the small, quiet voices that begged for warmth, for food, or for someone to remember that they existed at all. These children, abandoned by fate and ignored by the city, were ghosts in plain sight. Ilara moved among them like a quiet guardian. She carried baskets of bread and thin blankets, worn but clean, and her hands were always busy. Her hair, dark and often tied back in a loose braid, swayed with each step as she went from one shadowed corner to another. Despite the city's indifference, she never let her spirit break. Every smile she coaxed from a child was a victory, a small act of rebellion against a world that had grown cold. That evening, as the sun sank behind the distant hills, painting the sky with strokes of red and purple, Ilara knelt in a narrow alleyway. She shared bread with a boy no older than 7, whose thin coat did little to guard him against the chill. His small hands trembled as he reached for the morsel, and she murmured gently, "Eat slowly, little one. You need your strength." He looked up at her with wide, wary eyes. You're the only one who remembers us," he whispered. Ilara's lips curved into a soft smile, but her heart ached. "I remember," she said simply, "and I will always remember." As the boy chewed quietly, Ilara's eyes scanned the alley. Her intuition, sharpened by years of wandering these streets, made her aware of the smallest noises: the scuffle of a rat, the distant cry of another child, the faint rustle of a shadow that didn't belong to the wind. Tonight she felt it again, a presence watching her, distant yet close, unseen yet undeniable. She paused and raised her head, peering into the darkened corners. The city's alleys were empty, or at least they seemed empty. She shook her head, trying to dismiss the uneasy feeling. Perhaps it was only the wind, or perhaps her imagination had been fed by the long hours she spent alone in the night. Yet the chill in her chest did not fade. Footsteps. They were light, careful, almost floating over the cobblestones. Ilara froze, her hands gripping the basket a little tighter. Her mind raced. Who could be walking the alleys at this hour? Most of the city slept, leaving only the forgotten and the lost awake to fend for themselves. From the shadows above, a figure watched her. He moved silently, a predator in form yet not in menace, at least not yet. His presence was commanding, ancient like the quiet that comes before a storm. A cloak flowed around him, black as midnight, and the glint of his eyes caught the fading light like distant rubies. His gaze lingered on Ilara with curiosity, but also something deeper, something dangerous yet strangely gentle. Ilara didn't see him yet, but she felt his eyes, and it made her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from an unexplainable awareness that she was being observed. She tried to shake it off, reminding herself of the children she had to feed. Her attention returned to the boy. "Here," she said softly, pressing the last piece of bread into his hand. "Go on now, back to your friends before it gets too dark." He looked at her, confusion and gratitude mixed in his gaze, and shuffled off into the alley, disappearing into the folds of the city's shadows. Ilara exhaled and began gathering the empty baskets and scraps of food. That was when she noticed it, a movement across the rooftops, quick and fluid. She stopped in her tracks, squinting into the darkness. For a brief moment she saw the outline of a man, tall and elegant, his presence almost unreal. And then he was gone. Her heart thumped. She had heard stories of the supernatural creatures that walked unseen among the living, but she had never believed them. She forced herself to focus on the tasks at hand. Tonight was not the night for wondering about shadows. Tonight she had work to do. By the time she returned to her small, hidden shelter beneath a collapsed building, the sky had darkened completely. The children she had helped earlier were already there, huddled together for warmth. They had built small nests with scraps of cloth and old blankets, and their eyes lit up when Ilara arrived. "Did you bring food?" one of them asked eagerly. She smiled, setting down the baskets. "Of course, there's enough for everyone. Tonight we feast. Laughter and chatter filled the small space, a fragile bubble of life in a world that had forgotten them. Ilara moved among them, helping to distribute the bread, listening to their stories, and offering words of comfort. Each smile, each spark of joy, felt like a small rebellion against the shadows that haunted the city. Yet even in the warmth of their makeshift family, Ilara could not shake the feeling that she was being watched. And she was right. From the high windows of the abandoned towers he observed. The vampire king, Kalen, had returned to the mortal realm, drawn by the rumors of a woman who cared for the children no one else remembered. He had not come to harm, not yet. But curiosity, and something deeper, drove him closer with each passing night. Centuries of solitude had taught him patience, yet the fire of fascination that Ilara stirred within him was unlike anything he had felt before. Her courage, her selflessness, her unwillingness to bow to despair, it all captivated him. He saw how she moved among the children, how her touch could calm fear, how her voice could coax laughter from even the most wary hearts. And he knew, with an intensity that both thrilled and frightened him, that she had no idea of the power watching over her. Ilara settled among the children that night, her back against the cold stone wall. She listened to their whispered dreams and fears, offering gentle reassurances, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel that the world could still be beautiful, even in its darkness. Outside, the night deepened. The wind carried faint echoes of the city's secrets, of lives forgotten and sins unspoken. Kalen lingered in the shadows, unseen yet ever present. He felt the tug of something he had not known in centuries, a longing not for power or conquest, but for connection, for a glimpse of humanity he had lost long ago. And then, as if the night itself held its breath, a small hand reached out to the darkness. One of the children, curious and bold, had noticed a shadow flit across the broken rooftops. "Ilara," the child whispered, pointing toward the sky, "there's someone there." Ilara's heart skipped a beat. She looked up, scanning the rooftops, but saw nothing. Perhaps it was a trick of the moonlight. Perhaps it was only her imagination, fueled by the long hours she spent alone in the alleys. Yet something in her chest warned her that this was no ordinary shadow. From above, Kalen watched, his eyes softening as he regarded her. He made no move, no sound. Yet he knew he had been seen, in some small, fleeting way. And for the first time in centuries, he wondered if he could reveal himself, if he could bridge the gap between the darkness he embodied and the light she carried within her. But the night was not yet ready for such revelations. Kalen melted back into the shadows, leaving Ilara with only the faintest whisper of his presence. Her unease lingered, a thread of anticipation woven through her courage. She could not know who he was, or what he wanted, but the feeling that she was no longer entirely alone in the dark would not leave her. As the children slept, exhausted and comforted by her care, Ilara sat quietly, listening to the wind sigh through the broken city. She traced patterns on the cold stone floor with her fingers, thinking of the lives she could touch, the children she could save, and the small victories she could claim against the neglect of the world. Yet deep in her heart she could not ignore the question that had begun to form, a quiet shadow over her thoughts. Was she truly alone? Or was there something more, something watching, waiting, and perhaps caring in its own dark way? Above her, the night held its secrets, and Kalen remained, a silent sentinel, drawn to a woman who fed the children everyone else ignored. And though neither of them could know it yet, the threads of fate had begun to weave a story that would bind them together in ways neither could imagine. The city slept beneath the veil of darkness, and for now, the children were safe. But in the distance, a storm began to stir, one that would test courage, hearts, and the fragile trust between light and shadow. Ilara did not yet know the world she had stepped into, nor the king who had silently claimed her attention. But as she drifted into a quiet, weary sleep, the air seemed to hum with a promise and a warning that her life and the lives of those she loved were about to change forever. The next night, the city felt colder, as if it knew something was coming. Shadows stretched farther than usual, curling over walls and rooftops, reaching into alleys where the forgotten children slept. Alara moved quietly through the streets, carrying her small basket of food. Her footsteps were soft, careful, so as not to wake the children huddled in their makeshift beds beneath broken archways. Her cloak clung to her shoulders as the wind whispered around the ruins. The moon hung low and pale, casting silver light across the crumbling stone. She paused at the edge of the first alley, listening. The night was quiet, too quiet, and that unsettled her. From the shadows above, he watched again. Kalen, the vampire king, lingered on a broken rooftop unseen. His eyes, bright like twin rubies, followed her every movement. There was something in the way she moved, gentle, careful, yet fierce in her purpose, that drew him closer, night after night. He wanted to know her, to see her up close, to understand why she carried warmth where the world had only left emptiness. But Kalen knew patience. Centuries of life had taught him that even the smallest misstep could ruin everything. So he waited, letting her work, letting her heart show itself in small, quiet acts of kindness. Alara knelt in the alley, placing scraps of bread beside a small group of children huddled for warmth. "Here," she said softly, "eat before it gets too cold." The children hesitated, some of them wary of strangers, but she smiled, a gentle, calming smile. "I won't hurt you. I promise." A small boy with dark, tired eyes stepped forward. You're the only one who cares," he whispered. His voice was barely audible, lost beneath the sigh of the wind. Alara knelt beside him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "I remember," she said, her voice firm but kind. "And I always will." Kalen, hidden above, felt something stir deep within him. He had seen women before, humans who tried to protect the helpless. But there was something in Alara that was different. She did not seek glory, nor fear, nor recognition. She moved with purpose, and her courage did not waver, even when faced with hunger, cold, and danger. He decided then that tonight he would step closer. He moved like a shadow, silent and fluid, landing on a roof across the alley. His presence was still hidden, but he shifted slightly, letting the moonlight catch the edges of his cloak. Alara's eyes flicked upward, sensing motion above her. She froze, her heart beating faster. The city had taught her to trust her instincts. Shadows rarely moved without reason. A soft, almost musical voice broke the night's silence. "You care for them," it said, low and smooth, as if spoken from a place far away. Alara's breath caught. "Who's there?" she called, her voice firm despite the tremor in her chest. From the shadows, Kalen stepped forward, but not fully. Only a sliver of him was visible, enough for her to see the dark cloak and the faint glint of red eyes in the moonlight. "You feed the children everyone else ignores," he said, a statement more than a question. "Why?" Alara's hands gripped the basket tighter. "Because someone must," she said, her voice steady. "If I don't, who will?" There was a pause. Kalen studied her, noting the lines of determination around her mouth, the strength in her eyes, and the warmth that radiated from her despite the cold night. It was unlike anything he had encountered in centuries. "You carry the weight of the world in your heart," he said softly. Alara glanced at him, her curiosity piqued, though caution remained. "And who are you, watching me from the rooftops?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he let her speak, let her sense his presence, as if testing whether she could handle the truth. "I am someone who is curious," he finally said. "Someone who has not seen someone like you in a very long time." She frowned slightly, still wary, but something about his tone intrigued her. There was no malice in it, no threat, only a quiet intensity. "I don't need watchers," she said simply. "I only need helpers." Kalen's eyes glimmered and a faint smile tugged at the corners of his lips. "Perhaps," he said, "I could be such a helper." Alara studied him. There was something unusual about the man or creature before her. He moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, as if the air itself bent to his will. Yet his gaze was fixed on her, not with hunger or danger, but with curiosity, and perhaps, she thought reluctantly, admiration. "I don't know you," she said cautiously. "How could I trust you?" Kalen considered this, his centuries of experience teaching him that trust was earned slowly. "Then perhaps," he said softly, "I will earn it, slowly." Alara did not respond. She returned her attention to the children, distributing bread, careful not to reveal her uncertainty. Yet she could not ignore the strange sense of safety his presence brought. It was terrifying and yet comforting. Over the next few nights, Kalen's visits became more deliberate. He left food in hidden places, silently watched over the children, and sometimes spoke to her from the shadows. Alara noticed, though she never saw him fully, only glimpses. A glint of eyes, a shadow that moved against the wind, a voice that floated on the night air. "You saved that one from the alley tonight," he said one evening, speaking softly as she fed a trembling child. "The boy with the dark eyes, you saved him before anyone else could." Alara looked up sharply. You were there." "I watched," he said simply. "I see those who act in the shadows. You act with courage." For the first time, Alara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar connection. She realized that someone had noticed her, not for what she had, but for what she gave. "And why do you care?" she asked quietly. Kalen hesitated, as if unsure how much to reveal. "Because," he paused, searching for words that centuries had made difficult. "Because it is rare to find someone who dares to hope, who dares to care when the world has turned its back." Her breath caught. She had spent so long believing she was alone, that her small acts of kindness mattered little in a city that had forgotten them all. And yet, here was someone, powerful, mysterious, dangerous, acknowledging her heart. The tension between them grew, quiet but electric, a current that hummed beneath every glance, every whispered word. Neither fully understood it, yet both felt its pull. One night, as they sat on opposite rooftops, Kalen spoke again, his voice barely audible over the wind. "You should not be out here alone," he said. "The city is not kind to those who wander its alleys at night." Alara's eyes met his, those glowing red eyes that seemed almost unreal. "I've survived this long," she said firmly. "I know the streets better than anyone." He inclined his head slightly, almost in respect. "And yet you still risk yourself every night for others. That is bravery, or perhaps foolishness." She smiled faintly, a little tired but unbroken. Bravery and foolishness can look the same, depending on who is watching. Kalen felt a strange warmth at her words. She did not fear him, nor did she seek to impress him. She spoke with honesty, with courage, with a heart that had known loss but still gave freely. And it stirred something long dormant within him, a desire he had not felt in centuries, the desire to connect, to protect, and perhaps to care in return. That night, as she walked back to the shelter with her basket empty but her heart full, Alara could not shake the sense that someone had been with her, watching, protecting. And though she did not yet see him clearly, she felt his presence as surely as she felt the cold wind against her cheeks. Kalen, watching her from the shadows, knew he was treading a fine line. To reveal himself fully could frighten her. To remain unseen might make her wary of him. Yet he could not resist the pull he felt toward her, nor the curiosity that had grown into something more. He whispered softly to the night, a promise as much to himself as to her. "I will not let the shadows harm you. Not while I can prevent it." Alara paused at the doorway to her shelter, the children safe inside, and looked up at the rooftops. "Is it only my imagination?" she whispered. But even as she spoke, a faint glimmer of movement caught her eye, a shadow that lingered a moment too long and then vanished into the darkness. Her heart raced, and yet a small part of her felt relief. Perhaps she was not entirely alone. Perhaps someone, somewhere, had noticed her courage and cared enough to watch over her. And in the quiet of the night, Kalen continued to watch, knowing that their paths were now intertwined. and that the bond between light and shadow, between her heart and his, had only just begun. The city had grown colder over the past few nights. A shadow seemed to linger in the alleys, darker than the natural night. Whispers of a curse began to circulate among those few who still dared to speak in the open. The air smelled of damp stone and the faint decay of forgotten corners, and even the children sensed that something was coming. Alara moved quickly through the streets, carrying her basket. Her mind was preoccupied with worry for the children. Many were sick, thin, or scared. Some had disappeared into the night before she could find them. She wondered if she was doing enough, if her small acts of care could ever stand against the darkness that crept quietly through the city. As she approached the shelter, she felt the familiar sensation that had been growing over the past nights, a presence, unseen yet undeniable, watching her. "You're here again," she said softly, knowing the words were meant for him, even though she had not seen him yet. Kalen stepped from the shadows, this time closer than ever. The moonlight glinted off his dark cloak, and she finally saw the full measure of his form. Tall, elegant, and moving with a grace that seemed otherworldly, he exuded an aura that was both powerful and unsettling. His eyes, a deep crimson in the pale light, held a mixture of curiosity and something softer, something that frightened her even as it drew her in. "I told you I would watch over you," he said, his voice low but steady. "I have kept my promise." Alara took a careful step back, her instincts telling her to be cautious. "You should not follow me here," she said. "The children are safe inside and they do not need shadows hovering over them." Kalen inclined his head, almost respectfully. "I do not mean to harm them, or you. But you need to understand what I am if we are to trust each other." Her brow furrowed. "What are you?" she asked, voice steady, though her heart beat faster. She had sensed something beyond human in him, but hearing it confirmed made the hairs on her arms rise. Kalen hesitated for only a moment. "I am Kalen, the Vampire King," he said, his tone calm, almost gentle. "I have walked this world for centuries, watching, learning, and regretting." Alara's eyes widened. Her mind spun, trying to reconcile the stories of monsters she had once dismissed with the man or creature before her. A vampire," she whispered. "Yes," he said simply. "But not all of my kind are cruel. I am not here to take, only to protect." Her gaze dropped to the basket in her hands. She wanted to believe him, and yet centuries of fear and caution fought against her trust. "Why help me, then? Why not let me struggle like the rest of the city?" Kalen looked away for a moment, his expression unreadable. "Because I have lived long enough to see the consequences of ignoring the forgotten. And because," he added quietly, "I see something in you that I have not seen in centuries. Courage, kindness, hope." Alara blinked, unsure what to say. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her as if her small acts mattered, as if her heart itself was something worth protecting. I, I don't know if I can trust you," she said finally. "Then allow me to earn it," he replied. "Allow me to show that I am not your enemy. And perhaps in time you will see that not all shadows bring harm." Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden, cold wind. The air grew heavier, and an unnatural darkness crept through the alleyways. She shivered. The children inside the shelter stirred, sensing the change in the night. "The curse," Kalen said, his voice sharp now. "It is awakening." Alara's eyes widened. "What curse?" Kalen took a deep breath, his expression darkening. "The city suffers because of an old magic, one tied to my bloodline. It was dormant for centuries, but someone, has begun to stir it again. Soon, it will threaten those you care for the most." Alara's hands clenched around the basket. "Then we must stop it," she said firmly, determination lighting her features. "I cannot let the children suffer because of some curse." Kalen studied her for a long moment. She was not afraid, not truly, even though she faced something beyond human understanding. There was a fire in her that made him want to protect her, to shield her from everything the world could throw at her. And yet, he knew that the curse would not be defeated without risk, without sacrifice. "Very well," he said finally, "but you must trust me completely. This is not something you can face alone." Alara hesitated. Trust did not come easily to her. She had learned over years of caring for children abandoned by the world that people often failed, that promises were broken. Yet something in Kaelin's eyes, something sincere, something ancient called to her. She nodded slowly. "I will trust you for them." Kaelin allowed himself a small, rare smile. "Then we begin." They spent the next hours preparing. Kaelin led her to hidden corners of the city she had never dared to explore, showing her passages and rooftops where the shadows could be used to their advantage. He taught her to notice signs of unnatural forces, to feel the currents of magic that now stirred in the city's heart. Alara was a quick learner, her courage and instinct guiding her in ways even Kaelin had not expected. And through it all, he remained at her side, a silent guardian and occasional guide, his presence a constant reminder that she was no longer entirely alone. Days passed, and the curse grew stronger. Shadows deepened in the alleys, moving with a life of their own. Strange figures appeared at night, creatures of mist and darkness, their eyes glinting with hunger. The children remained largely unaware, thanks to Alara's vigilance, but she felt the fear in the city pressing closer, like a tide ready to break. One evening, as she returned to the shelter after delivering food, she found Kaelin waiting on the rooftop above. His expression was grave, and the wind tossed his dark hair around his face. "They are stronger than I expected," he said, his voice low. "The curse does not wish to be stopped. It feeds on fear and neglect. It grows stronger every night." Alara frowned. "Then we cannot wait, we must act now." Kaelin shook his head slowly. "Not yet. To face it too soon would risk the children, risk you. We must be ready. And we must understand it first." Her eyes narrowed. "We do not have time for preparation. Every night more of them disappear. We cannot let fear paralyze us while lives are at stake." Kaelin's gaze softened. "I know, and that is why I am here. You will not face it alone." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden movement in the alley below. A shadow lunged forward, darker than night, its form twisting unnaturally. One of the children screamed, and Alara froze for a moment, her heart racing. Kaelin moved before she could, a blur of motion. He landed between the child and the darkness, his cloak flowing like liquid night. The creature recoiled at his presence, hissing, and then dissipated into the mist, leaving only a faint echo behind. Alara's breath came in sharp bursts. What was that?" "A manifestation of the curse," Kaelin said grimly. "It tests the city looking for weaknesses. It senses fear and preys upon it." Her hands clenched. "Then it will not find weakness here, not while I am here." Kaelin's gaze lingered on her, admiration and something deeper reflected in his eyes. "You are remarkable," he said softly. "Even against darkness, even in the face of things that would break others, you stand strong. It is extraordinary." Alara felt a warmth at his words, a rare sense of validation. She had spent so long giving without recognition, protecting without hope of thanks. And here was someone, ancient, powerful, and otherworldly, seeing her courage. For a moment they simply stood together on the rooftop, the city quiet below, the wind stirring around them. Two figures connected by circumstance and purpose, drawn together by the weight of responsibility and the spark of something neither fully understood. But the city's danger was far from over. The curse pulsed through the streets, growing stronger with every hour, feeding on fear, neglect, and despair. Kaelin knew that the coming days would test both of them, pushing them to the limits of their courage, their trust, and their hearts. And Alara, though unaware of the full magnitude of the forces they faced, felt it too, a tension in the air, a pull toward something larger than herself, something that demanded courage, sacrifice, and perhaps a willingness to believe in the impossible. As they prepared for the coming nights, Kaelin finally spoke the words that had been unspoken between them. "Alara, whatever happens, know this. You are not alone. I will not allow harm to come to you or the children, and I will stand with you until the end." Alara's eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment she allowed herself to hope. But the night pressed in around them, heavy with the promise of trials yet to come. From the shadows of the streets below, the curse stirred once more, and a whisper of something ancient and dangerous slithered through the city. The test had begun, and the true challenge, of heart, of courage, and of trust, was only just starting. Alara did not yet know the full measure of what awaited her, but as she looked to Kalen standing beside her on the rooftop, she knew one thing for certain: she would not face it alone, and neither would he. The night deepened, the city trembled, and the threads of fate, dark and luminous all at once, began to weave their story of fear, hope, and redemption. The city trembled beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. Wind whistled through the streets and alleys, carrying with it a chill that seemed unnatural, almost alive. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the corners, creeping along the walls and rooftops. The children, huddled together in the shelter, whispered in frightened tones, unaware of the full danger that pressed closer with every passing moment. Alara moved quickly, her cloak wrapped tightly around her shoulders, carrying baskets of food and blankets. But tonight, she did more than feed the children. She fortified their small sanctuary, sealing doors with old wooden boards and covering windows with thick cloth to shield them from the darkness outside. She glanced at the sky, sensing the unnatural energy in the air. Kalen appeared silently beside her, emerging from the shadows as though the night itself had handed him to her. His presence was commanding, yet his gaze softened as it fell upon her. "They are coming," he said, his voice low and calm, though the crimson glow in his eyes betrayed the urgency of the situation. "The curse has grown stronger. We cannot delay any longer." Alara looked up at him, determination flaring in her chest. "Then we face it together." Kalen nodded, and together they moved toward the heart of the city, where the darkness pulsed strongest. The streets were empty, silent except for the howling wind and the faint whispers of unseen creatures. The shadows seemed alive, writhing and stretching like dark smoke. "This way," Kalen whispered, guiding her through narrow alleyways and hidden passages only he knew. "The source of the curse lies beneath the old cathedral. It feeds on fear and neglect, growing stronger with every moment of despair." Alara's grip tightened on his arm as they descended into the dark, damp tunnels below the cathedral. The air was thick, almost suffocating, carrying a faint scent of decay. Faint echoes of whispered voices reverberated off the stone walls, chilling her to the bone. Yet she pressed forward, refusing to give in to fear. At the center of the cathedral's underground chamber, the curse manifested in a swirling mass of shadows, writhing and shifting as though alive. Its form was indistinct, dark, and terrifying, yet there was a sense of intelligence in its movement, as if it could sense their every thought, every hesitation. Kalen stepped forward, his presence like a shield against the darkness. "It feeds on fear," he said. "Do not falter, Alara. You must remain strong for the children, for the city, and for yourself." Alara nodded, her heart steady despite the terror in the room. "I will not falter." The shadows surged forward, tendrils of darkness reaching for them. Kalen's eyes glowed bright red, and he moved with supernatural speed, placing himself between the darkness and Alara. He raised a hand, and a wave of energy, black and silver intertwined, emanated from him, pushing the shadow back. "You have lived in the light too long to fear the dark," he said, his voice firm, "and you are not alone." Alara felt a surge of courage at his words. She stepped forward, raising her hands and focused on the light within herself. The warmth she carried for the children, the hope she nurtured in the forgotten, the courage that had guided her through countless nights. She poured it into the air, into the room, into the darkness. The shadow recoiled as if struck by her resolve. Kalen moved closer, his strength amplifying hers, and together they faced the heart of the curse. It screamed, a soundless cry that reverberated through the tunnels, seeking to break their spirits, but neither of them faltered. "You are not meant to rule this city with fear," Kalen said, his voice rising over the wind and shadows. "It is not your power, it is ours to protect, to nurture, and to save." Alara's heart flared with determination. She thought of the children huddled in the shelter above, of their faces, their small hands, their trust in her. She focused on that trust, that love, that small spark of light that refused to be extinguished. The shadow surged one final time, but Kalen and Alara moved as one. Energy intertwined with courage, power meeting hope, and the darkness shattered, dissolving into the air like mist under the morning sun. The tunnels grew still, the air lighter, and for the first time in weeks, Alara felt the weight of fear lift. Kalen lowered his hands, his expression calm but exhausted. He looked at Alara, and for a moment the centuries of solitude he had carried seemed to fade from his eyes. "It is done," he said softly. "The curse is broken." Alara took a deep breath, her body trembling from exhaustion and relief. "We did it," she whispered. "Together." Kalen smiled faintly, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "Yes, together." They returned to the shelter above, where the children slept, safe at last. Alara moved among them, checking blankets and blankets, offering quiet reassurances. Kalen stood at the entrance, watching her, his eyes filled with something she could not yet name: admiration, respect, perhaps even something deeper. "You saved them," he said quietly. "And you saved the city." Alara looked at him, her heart softening. "We saved it," she said, her voice steady. "Together." Kalen inclined his head. "I have walked this world for centuries," he said, "and I have seen much darkness, but I have never seen courage like yours, Alara." "Never." Her cheeks warmed at his words, though she kept her gaze focused on the children. "I did what I had to do," she said softly. "I could not turn away." Kalen stepped closer, his presence comforting and steady. "And that is why you are remarkable," he said. "Because even in the face of darkness, you give light, you give hope." The children stirred in their sleep, and Alara's eyes softened. She moved among them, touching a small hand here, brushing a lock of hair there. They were safe now, protected by the courage of one woman and the power of another who had finally chosen to walk in the light rather than the shadows alone. Kalen watched her, and for the first time in centuries, he felt the possibility of redemption. The weight of his past, the centuries of solitude and guilt, seemed to lift, if only slightly, under her gaze. She had shown him that even those who dwell in darkness could find purpose, could protect, could care. The night outside began to lighten as dawn approached. The first soft rays of sunlight filtered through the cracks in the walls, casting a gentle glow over the city. For the children, for the city, for Alara and Kalen, a new day had begun. Alara finally turned to Kalen, her expression thoughtful. "What will you do now?" she asked quietly. "Will you stay?" Kalen hesitated, looking out over the city that had once been his domain in shadow. "I have choices I must make," he said, "but I do not wish to leave you. You have shown me that even in darkness there is light worth protecting." Her heart quickened at his words. "Then stay," she said simply, "not as a shadow over us, but as someone who walks beside us." He considered her words, the centuries of solitude pressing against the possibility of connection. Finally, he nodded. "Then I will stay, not as a king above you, but as someone who stands with you, together." Alara smiled faintly, a sense of peace settling in her heart. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that the darkness could be met with light, that fear could be met with courage, and that hearts once isolated could find connection. The children stirred, sensing the calm in the air, and Alara gathered them close, whispering promises of safety and care. Kalen watched, standing beside her, a silent guardian and partner, the weight of centuries lifted by a newfound hope. And as the sun rose over the city, casting gold and warmth across the rooftops and streets, Alara and Kalen stood together, their hands almost touching. The storm had passed, the curse had been broken, and the bond between light and shadow had been forged in courage, trust, and redemption. The city would heal slowly but surely, and the children would grow, nourished by love and hope. And for Alara and Kalen, a new chapter had begun, a life no longer divided by darkness and light, but united in purpose and heart. As they looked toward the rising sun, Kalen spoke softly, almost to himself. The world may still be cruel, but with you, it is not so dark. Alara's hand brushed against his, and she felt the warmth of connection, of trust, of something that had begun in shadow but now walked fully in the light. Together, she whispered, and for the first time in centuries, Kalen truly believed it. The city breathed beneath them, alive with the promise of tomorrow. Shadows remained as they always would, but they no longer held power over those who dared to hope. And in the heart of the forgotten, two souls, bound by courage, kindness, and trust, had found each other. The night had passed, the light had returned, and the story of Alara and Kalen, of the woman who fed the children everyone ignored, and the vampire king who chose to protect rather than dominate, would echo in the city forever, a legend of courage, love, and redemption.